Hello and welcome to You Can Grow Your Own Way, a conversation for parents and carers of neurodivergent children. I feel so privileged you are taking time out of your busy life to learn all about the ways to interpret neurodivergence for you and your child. Remember, all advice on this podcast is general and may not specifically apply to your child, so we encourage you to also talk to your GP, paediatrician or specialist to see if what you've learned will help your family. Hello, all you fabulous parents and carers, and welcome to You Can Grow Your Own Way. We are joining you today for a conversation all around those complicated feelings that we get about our relationships with our neurodivergent children. So what happens when we love our neurodivergent child, but sometimes we don't like them? We've all been there, we've all felt it. We don't always talk about it, but it's definitely something that should be discussed. And we are joined again today by Chelle Taylor from Blossomtree Psychology. She came to us on the podcast when we were discussing everything to do with developmental trauma, which is one of my favourite episodes. So I'm very excited to have her back. I'm also very biased because she is my family's clinical psychologist and works with all three of my children. And I feel very blessed to have that privilege. So before we dive into bios and all of those things, I will give a warning. There's a few naughty words in this episode. We did get a bit impassioned, so there's a little bit of swearing. So for those with sensitive ears, or if they've got kids nearby with sensitive ears, please be warned. I'm not bleeping them out, so there might be a little bit of cussing. So Chelle is Director and Clinical Psychologist at Blossomtree Psychology. She's a current Phase 3 trained mentor with the Neurosequential Network and a NAPA Infant Parent Mental Health Fellow with the UC Davis Infant Parent Child Institute. Chelle provides training, reflective supervision and consultation to individuals and services. Chelle also, together with her canine co-therapists, Denver, Callie and Maple, offers specialised trauma and attachment-based interventions for parents, infants and young children aged 0 to 5. She was recently awarded the Bruce D. Perry Spirit of the Child Award in recognition of her provision of services to children to reduce child maltreatment, promote joy and safety for children and their families, and continuously nurturing and safeguarding the spirit of every child. That is quite the award. This included recognition of her tireless work in disseminating Dr. Bruce Perry's neurosequential model of therapeutics and supporting fidelity of this approach in both her personal practice and also throughout Australia and beyond. Chelle has worked clinically with children and families who have experienced trauma and attachment disruption for over 27 years, and she's joining us now. So welcome back, Chelle. We've been able to convince you to come back onto the podcast and very, very glad for it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Carly, thank you so much for the invite to come back. I'm so excited for the conversation we're going to have today.
And I gave you a big, meaty, juicy one again. It's probably, I would say this is the beginning of our Taboo Topics series that we're going to intersperse over the next couple of seasons, talking about things that parents often feel but don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about. And so we think it's really, really important that we have those conversations. We let everybody know that we are all having very similar feelings in these particular situations, and not only sharing in that knowledge and that emotion, but seeing if there's any way that we can either sit in it better or do anything to resolve it. So talking today about what happens when you love your neurodivergent child and you don't necessarily like them. We're going to be covering two different areas today. So we're going to be looking about when that can happen in the moment. So you've had some really difficult times, really difficult situations, and it's actually making you feel quite, repelled by your child and how that can feel and what to do. And then we're also going to talk about when you struggle to connect with your neurodivergent child. So, the way that they display emotion, the way that they seek connection with others may be very different to what we recognise, and how that can feel as a parent, what we can look for to help with that connection, and how we can kind of step through those moments. So, yeah, none of it sort of super easy, but thoroughly important conversations, and very glad to be having them with someone who's got such expertise in child psychology. So Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Um,
Can I just jump in, Carly?
mm,
I guess one of the things that I want to sort of start with is this is something I'm really passionate about because I see parents all the time, and I guess I want to make kind of a big disclaimer that we're going to be talking about parents of children with neurodivergence. But I really want to say that certainly our first topic I think is relevant for all parents.
agreed.
It's just like it's on steroids for our parents with kids with neurodivergence, to be
Mm-hmm.
fair, right? So
Mm-hmm.
everything that I think we experience in terms of generic parenting is exacerbated, and I think largely because of some of those things that we're going to talk about in the second half, and some of the difficulties in communication and social understanding that can occur. Um, but I think what's so passionate about for me is that I see so many families, irrespective of the child's diagnostic status, where parents really feel this overarching need to present as competent, skilled, capable, almost perfect. And it's a real passion of mine for my industry, particularly, to start showing up as professionals with a little bit more vulnerability and imperfection and authenticity. Because I always worry about what we model to our parents around perfectionism when they're
Mm.
already battling these societal ideals around perfect parenting. And then we come along and add to that by being these perfect, put together individuals who, seemingly don't have trouble with our kids. Bull. Like, that's just a fat lie. Um, and and so I think we've got to show up authentically and vulnerably so that our parents feel comfortable too, because society out there is looking at them. You see it in the supermarket, you see it at Kmart when kids are throwing tantrums on the floor, and you watch people, other families looking at the parent as if to say, "Get your child under control." In those moments, I always walk up and I go, "Hey, mum, you're doing a great job today.
Mm. Yeah.
I love the fact that you're just letting her, tantrum this out."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think there's another, I mean, as you were saying that, there's two layers of it that have also popped into my head. One is that we, even as parents, when we've got challenging behaviors from our children, we still want to show how much we love them. And so saying that this is too hard or I don't know what to do, we're worried that that also might look bad on the child, and we don't necessarily want to say that because we're so conscious of how much we care about the perception of our child, and understanding that this is something that happens for everybody, I think, helps dismiss that myth so that we can all say kids have hard days, we have hard days, that's fine. It doesn't mean that we think any less of our children, and it doesn't mean that we think any less of ourselves.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
I personally love the movement to attachment based parenting, and also to the proper premise of gentle parenting, not permissive parenting, but gentle parenting. I think the challenge that can come with that sometimes when it comes to parents being vulnerable is that we spend so much of our time being conscious of how our emotions are impacting our children, how we want to stay regulated and calm for our children, that it can mean that that bleeds over into spaces where we don't really have anywhere where we can be completely emotionally vulnerable, and we can fall apart.
yeah,
And just because we work really hard to be regulated for our kids does not mean that we need to be emotionally void. It does not mean that we as parents can't have a space where we can say, I just need to cry or stamp or drink this shit out.
yeah. In fact, it's essential that you have a space. When I was thinking about this before coming onto the call with you, one of my big things was making sure that there's a support network for you as an individual where you can go and, well, think about it like in a couple relationship when you go off and chat with your girlfriends about what, your husband's done or your partner's
Mm.
done, or um, and vice versa when the boys get together over beers and they're, and I'm sure they do, and they say they don't, but they do. Um,
Oh,
and and
they
it's
definitely
about
have a whinge.
yeah. So it's about having that space, and I think there's something. I worry. I guess I worry that gentle parenting. I think I like you. I'm a massive supporter of gentle, not permissive parenting. We know that kids' brains need boundaries, but we need them to be offered in a regulated way. and they need to be done around logic learning and discipline, like, in terms of teaching as opposed to punishment.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
that said, though, I worry that that approach has left parents feeling like I have to be regulated all the time. I'm not allowed to lose my shit, for want of a better word. Excuse my language, but I'm not allowed to lose. I'm not allowed to
mm,
lose my cool with my kids, and that's just not. That's not real. That's not.
mm,
We all come. Last time I talked about that stress response continuum, we all move up and down it. You're going to have days where you've got the flu, you've still got a parent. Where you're tired, you've still got a parent. Where you're hungover, you've still got a parent. Where three kids are demanding, your attention, or four kids, or five kids, or whatever it might be, or one kid has
mhm,
just worn you down and you are exhausted, and you're going to be up that continuum and you might snap. Or you put all of this effort into regulating and staying present and being exactly what your kids need in that moment. But that doesn't mean that in the next 5 minutes you don't need five minutes to yourself to
mm,
go off and scream, to think to yourself, you know, why can't you just? Or
mhm.
whatever it might be, all of the thoughts that we are so afraid to say out loud, and that we would never say to our children because we love them. And as you were talking before, and as I was talking then, one of the things I was thinking about is, I wonder, and as you know, Carly, I'm a wanderer.
You
So
are, you are.
I wonder about, um, is this harder because we do love them so much? Like, I wonder if there's a direct correlation between, and I don't know if there's any evidence on this, and I don't know that
Mm,
people would be able to get it through ethics to study it anyway.
yeah.
But I suspect there's a direct correlation between the extent of love and desire to provide and support our kids, and
Mm.
the extreme frustration and at times dislike that we might have at.
Yeah, and look, adding to that, I think because and I would say that a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast would come from that place. That's why they're doing the listening and the learning that they are doing. Um, that we've chosen conscious parenting. We've chosen to observe our own behaviors and how they impact our children and make decisions that are intentional about the growth and development of our children. And so I think what you're saying there, and the magnification of emotions and feelings that comes from the love, I think that, the presence is connected to the love, and that
Yeah,
presence then means that everything feels important and everything feels big.
yeah,
And if we didn't care and if we weren't being present, we just get pissed off and then yell and then storm off and leave our kids to deal with the bomb that we dropped. But it's not what we do.
yeah,
And so that, I think, is part of that heightened tornado that in a way we are sort of creating in those moments that are particularly emotionally volatile.
yeah, yeah. And you used the term conscious parenting, and I would reframe that up to be reflective parenting, because I think
Mm,
anybody, or a lot of parents who are doing gentle parenting, it requires such a high level of reflective ability if you're doing it really well, because you are reflecting on what happened in that moment. Why did I react that way? What was that
mm,
about? What's going on for them? What did I bring into this from my past or my
mhm,
history? And
mhm,
here's the thing that, I've been at this for, what did I say last time, 30 odd years.
mm,
Um, I It's only in the last 5 years that that I became really aware of the more recent literature, which shows us that the quality of attachment that a child experiences to their primary caregiver, the best predictor of that attachment relationship is not whether or not a parent shows up or how they show up. It's actually about a parent's reflective capacity.
yeah. Wow. Wow.
So
I
it's
actually
actually the ability to stop and think about parenting.
I read something that adds into this as well, that the current parent generation. So, I mean, you can talk millennials and whatever, but if we talk about the current parent generation, so people who are parenting right now, um, they're the first generation of parents on record that have made a concerted effort to break the patterns of previous parenting that have been disruptive to children and their growth. And because of that, because of, as we're saying, the reflective parenting, because of that conscious awareness of our own behaviour and trying to work out why, we're also one of the most exhausted generations of parents because we are forever aware and forever being active in how we think and act and do.
Yeah. But there's another element to that. It's not just about being aware and being active. You are almost like, it's almost like thinking about it like a middle management. You are actively parenting in the conscious, reflective way you want to. You're reflecting and thinking about your parenting, but you're also combating the demons of the past and the
Yeah.
baggage that you're bringing forward from the parenting experiences that have travelled down intergenerationally, one of which is not being taught how to be with your own feelings.
Mm.
So
Yes.
our
Yes.
parents, our current generation are doing their own work on their own emotional regulatory capacities, while
While
at the
helping
same
their
time
kids.
teaching their kids how to be emotionally regulated beings.
Yeah. 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 If it was appropriate for a podcast format, I would actually stand up and cheer all the parents that are currently listening to our podcast because
Yeah,
it's a lot of bloody work. It's a lot of work. And I
it's
think it's so important that it's recognized. And
yeah,
yeah, well
yeah.
done.
And this is not, I mean, this is this is not what your podcast's about, but this is why the current Medicare model doesn't match what's
Mm,
required for our current parents.
mm,
So Medicare will provide 10 sessions, rebatable, not bulk billed unless you go to a bulk billing clinic, which there
mm.
are very few of. Let me be very
Yes.
clear,
And the wait
listeners.
lists are enormous.
Correct. So you'll be paying out of pocket for 10 sessions,
Mm,
two of which can be used to see parents. That means the child gets 8 and the parent has access to 2. There's nowhere in there that factors in any work with the parents around navigating, reflecting on their parenting, navigating their own history and how that impacts parenting, and helping them with strategies for managing their children. That
mm.
requires parents to see a clinical psychologist because a psychologist can't do parenting work with a parent, which is not fair because they're equally capable at doing it as what I am as a clinical psychologist, but it requires a parent to get their own mental health care plan. Now, what if they're needing to deal with their stuff, like that's
Mm,
outside of parenting?
mm.
So, the model that's required to effectively help our current parents, and particularly
Yes.
our parents of neurodivergent kids, because not even NDIS necessarily, unless you advocate very strongly, and under the current changes in the model, it's going to get harder and harder.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't allow for parent coaching.
No,
Child
no.
focused, what I call child focused parent support. So when I see kids, I will always see the kids and I always make sure I've got sessions for the parents.
Yeah.
That's what makes it successful.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And we frequently speak about the gap between NDIS, the education system, and the National Carer Strategy, and how none of those things actually seem to connect up and speak to each other to be able to support units as a whole. Um,
Yeah,
and while not, you know, named in the topic of the podcast, the reason that flagging that is really, really important is that it lets our parents also know and understand that those times they have those feelings, my God, they are so fair. They are
yeah,
so fair to have them because not only is it human, but also you're not being given all the tools and resources to help you work through those moments. So please be kind to yourself. Please be kind to yourself. Um,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so look, I think we might jump into that little video that I
Mm,
recorded. Um, I recorded a snippet about a month ago when I knew we were doing this topic about a particularly challenging period of days that I was having with my family. And I thought it would be really good to step out of myself and just record that so we had some lived experience. So we will play that now. So I'm doing this as an in the moment recording for, I know we've got an upcoming episode about when you love but don't like your children. And I wanted to share this little in the moment anecdote. We've had, to say we've had a day, is an understatement. We've been having a few days. I've got Mr. 9 screaming at me every single second. Mr. 7 currently has insomnia and isn't going to bed till after 10:30. And Miss 5 is a bag of rocks by the afternoon, which involves throwing things, screaming at me, and refusing to eat. I am doing my absolute best to stay as calm as I possibly can. And I have to admit, I'm currently quite proud of myself for how calm that I am staying. But I have this inner urge to go and get in my car and drive down the driveway and run away and not come back. This is unbelievably hard. And I don't even know sometimes how I'm going to get to the end of the day, wake up and start again the next day. And it felt very important that I shared this moment, considering that I know that we're going to be talking about this and sharing it from my own reality. Many tears in the shower have been shed and many screams yelled outside. So I love and adore them completely, but right now don't really want to look at them. Whew. So I will say that's brought some memories and some tears back to my eyes.
I bet.
I think something I want to add straight away there while it's fresh in my mind is that those moments do happen, and they probably happen every few weeks. And right now, I'm in a spot where things are only challenging from one. And so the ability to be rational and balance and walk away and come back is very different to the cyclone of what was happening when I recorded that. And it is amazing as well how the body and the heart can sort of forget or diminish those moments to allow you to continue to get on with what's new and what's happening. So anyway, I just wanted to add that because I thought it was really important. But Chelle, your thoughts?
Carly, I'm just really curious what it was like for you watching that again.
I went
For you?
straight back there. I went straight back there. My heart was racing. I felt like it was up in my throat. My eyes were stinging with tears. I could feel like the speed of thoughts starting, like I was going to have to go out and deal with, 3 situations going at once. So for me, it was literally like stepping straight back into it.
Yeah. And I think that's really important for listeners to, really be thoughtful about and kind with yourself around. So as you navigate experiences like this, which you all are, on a regular basis, your nervous system adjusts. And so like a trauma bond, like a trauma event, you get a shift in an alteration in your nervous system. And so when you are then represented with it, so it might be you're busy sitting in the lounge room or you're in the kitchen folding laundry or whatever it might be, and then you hear the squeal or you hear the kind of escalation, there'll be an immediate upregulation in your nervous system. Your heart will beat faster, your chest will get tighter, you'll start to feel anxious, all of those things that happen for you when before it's even occurred. And so I think being mindful of that and paying attention to that for yourself, because that's that first piece around, all right, I need to catch that and not react, because if I launch off that, I'm likely to launch, as opposed to if I catch it and honour it, but also try and regulate it as best I can, re-regulate myself as best I can to manage the situation. And one of the things we know is that we can live with very high reactive nervous systems for, a lengthy period of time and still cope well. I mean, when I watch that video, I'm sort of like, wow, Carly, you look so collected, and, you can hear kind of the pauses and the finding my words, but you're still finding your words and you still have access to your cortex and you have the forethought to think about putting the recording together in preparation for this. Like, there's all of that stuff. But I also know you, so I know that your nervous system was right up there. Yeah. And so I think that's the other thing to remember is for listeners as they watch that or hear that, they're going to hear that you still sound pretty collected. And that's what your children experience. So in the inside, you might be feeling like you are yelling and raging at them because your nervous system's right up. But
Mm,
actually, also be really mindful about, well, hang on, am I presenting that, or am I presenting this relatively regulated, collected look on the outside for my kids? Because
yeah.
often what we
Am,
have
am
going
I a
on the
duck?
inside is different. Yeah,
Yeah. Am I being a duck? Am I paddling like crazy underwater and I just look like I'm swimming on top?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, there's something else I think when anyone who watches that on YouTube is going to watch Mr. Seven decide to stick his face in and look incredibly charming
Mm,
and innocent. And I actually, I kind of love that because it just shows how they can switch from one to the other so fast. And he's coming to find me all charm.
mm,
And I suppose the reason I wanted to say that is that there's so many things that happen in those moments where our children are feeling explosive or feeling exhausted or feeling unwell that really do build. And I think the parents of neurodivergent children, the thing I was sort of also thinking this while I was listening back to that as well, the thing that makes it magnified from a neurotypical experience is that big developmental gap. And so there are certain behaviors that over time, a neurotypical child, an emotionally balanced neurotypical child will grow out of or will understand is inappropriate. And the reality when you're a parent of a neurodivergent child, you will often experience those behaviors for a lot longer.
yeah,
You can also experience some of their asynchronicity. So, for example, I have a 5-year-old girl who has sometimes the emotional capacity of a 3-year-old, but the language capacity of a 9-year-old. So she can be screaming and kicking and throwing and saying some things that are so manipulative that you just would not expect to be happening by a
mm,
5-year-old. Very similar to my Mr. Nine. You know, he has very delayed capacities to emotionally regulate. He flies off the handle at such a quick rate. But his words that he chooses sometimes can be so cutting.
mm,
Um, and so you can be dealing with that dichotomy of like, I'm dealing that the emotions that are being displayed in a physical sense, in the way they're breaking down and how they're falling apart, are well under their years. But I may also be receiving this verbal barrage that I would not be expecting of a child that age. And it can be very, very complicated to navigate.
yeah.
Um, and I think the other really important thing to say about that as well is I don't think any parent should be made to think that it doesn't hurt.
No.
Just because it comes from your child, it does not mean that you can automatically rationalize it away and that it doesn't hurt. In fact, sometimes it can hurt more because you may have spent that entire day doing absolutely everything you can for the needs of that child, over and above, putting yourself behind. And despite that, at the end of the day, they fall apart. You are at the end of your rope, and then you receive this vitriol to your face. Of course, you should feel hurt. Of course, you should feel distance. Of course, you might have that response that I said there about wanting to get in the car and drive away. That's fight or flight. I wanted to get out of there. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And that's so normal.
Yeah, yeah. I think in that, it's important to honour that feeling of hurt, but not necessarily give that back to our children. And that's that
Correct.
coming back to they might have the language skills, but the words that are being used are just an expression of the developmental age, like the
Mm,
developmental
mm,
expression of emotion. And so
yes.
um, they're vitriolic and they're hurtful and they're horrid. And in the moment, I think you've got to honour that experience. But you've also then got to go, you know what, was there malice? Is this deliberate or is this reactive? And
Yes.
if we
Yes.
think about these kids as being less emotionally capable, less emotionally regulatory, and therefore far more reactive and quick to fly off the handle up that arousal continuum,
Mm,
much, much more easier to dysregulate, then what you're getting is reactivity, not cognitive attack. And
correct.
so honouring the hurt, but taking a moment in that regulation of honouring, which
Mm,
is regulating, right? Well, that really
mm.
hurt me. To then stop and go, reminding ourselves that, you know what, it's not okay, but I also get that
That they're
this
just
is,
firing off.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're
Mm,
just firing off,
mm,
in
mm.
the same way when they lash out with their hands and with their feet and all of that sort of stuff. It's their, for whatever reason, it's their overactive stress response systems and they're up that arousal continuum. It's the brain saying, I just need to protect myself against whatever. There's
Correct.
no logic in it. There's no person in it. There's no, which is why Mr. Seven comes in and waves at you like he does and looks all, and why they come back and seek us out.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big challenges in those moments for us as well, is that they they can very quickly go from being absolutely rage furious to move on from that moment. And they move on, and when they move on, they're like, but that was then. Like, that happened 3 minutes ago. Why are we still dealing with this? And us as parents are still reeling from what's just happened. And we've still got to workshop it, but they want us to be in the state that they're now in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's some of that coming back to us. There's a couple of things in that. One is, I think for a lot of our neurodivergent kids, we have that as adults and parents, we look at it and go, there's lack of empathy. And that kind of, or there's a struggle with empathy because of that limited struggles in social understanding. And so it appears as though there's sort of no real empathy and I could just forget it and move on. And I think that's really hard when we've been parented. We sit down, think about your behaviour, and almost
Mm,
kind of like lectured until our skin is falling off with shame. Experience of, how we made the other person feel.
mm-hmm.
And so we're, this super empathy or guilt, whatever it might be.
Yep.
And
My mum used to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning. She'd come in when
yeah,
I was asleep and sit on the edge of my bed. It was
yeah,
great.
yeah,
It's like,
great.
I've got school in the morning. Can you go away?
We're going to be doing this tomorrow if you keep me awake because I'm going to be up the arousal continuum again. So I think there's that part of it. But then the other part is if you've got neurodivergence and then an overlay of trauma like you've got, Carly, like you and Richie have
Yes.
got, what you end up with is you've got kids who, at a core biological attachment level, if there's an awareness that they have upset the
Mm,
relationship, there's a
mm.
desperation to fix it.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And I
Very
think
much.
with Mr. Nine, we're seeing less and less of that desperation because we're
Mm,
seeing more and more of a gap between development and chronology.
correct.
And so we're seeing far more neurodivergence than trauma in him now.
Yes.
Whereas Mr. Seven, I think we
Oh, he
see
fawns.
we've got to fix
Yes.
it, got to fix it straight away.
Yep. He fawns 100%.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I'm very aware that
Yeah.
that's what's happening. So it doesn't feel false and,
Yeah.
and sticky and yuck. But it's interesting. And I suppose, I challenge the parents who are listening to think about that as well. Like, what is their behavior like after? Do you get that fawning? Do you get dismissal? Do you get move on? Do they, it's really interesting to observe what they are aware of and how
Mm,
they then react to
mm,
themselves in that.
mm. Yeah. Because
So,
Mr. Nine
yeah.
would look like he lacks empathy, like he just doesn't care.
Yep. Yep. Walks
Mr.
away like nothing
Seven
happened.
is I've got to fix it. I've got to
Mm-hmm.
come and make up to you, but not talk about it directly. And this
Correct.
five is like indifferent.
Oh, that's changed. So we'll
Oh.
have to discuss that. She's now very aware of,
Yeah,
and
okay.
she'll come up to me and say, "I'm sorry I said that and it hurt you, mummy."
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So everyone, things can happen.
Yeah.
there is magic out there in that universe. Um,
And
yeah,
that's a really good point, Carly, because that's the other thing to remember is, in the kindness and the compassion that we're giving to ourselves and our kids, is that this takes time.
yes,
Like non-neuro, in neurotypical, it takes a long time.
yeah, God, yeah, yep,
When we've got neurodivergence, we're talking about, divergence in neural functioning in the
mm,
brain.
mm,
And the brain to change takes a long time after a certain age. And so it's going to take a long time, and that's okay.
mm,
It's just,
mm,
it's about having the right support systems around us to be able to get through it, ride
yeah.
the waves.
And so, kind of picking up bits and pieces as we've been talking, some of the things I've taken out from what you've been saying around how we manage these things, it's stop and reflect in the moment where you can. Definitely take the time to reflect afterwards and see. And I think what's really powerful, if you can, is over periods of time, see if you can identify patterns when you do that reflection, because that can really help you not only predict and almost prepare yourself for what might happen, but also to see if there's any ways to create change.
Mm.
Be kind to yourself. Find moments where you can actually just have an opportunity to be. And,
Yeah,
we've talked about this in our self care episode. That is very hard, but even micro opportunities still build up and they're better than nothing.
yeah.
Um, Use our mindfulness mini-sodes if you need to for your 3 minutes in the car so that you can go. And even if you leave the house and you turn to your partner and you say, I'm going to sit in the car for 5 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do. You sit in the car and whether you listen to a mini-sode, whether you put on a couple of songs, whatever you do, even if that's what you need to do, that is still very important. And if you didn't take those 5 minutes, imagine what you're not taking at all. So they still add up.
Absolutely.
Um, and the other is to have some peers that you can share this with.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to add? Like, did I kind of
Mm-hmm.
summarize that well?
You summarised that really well. I think the things I'd want to add in is with peers, what you want is you want a really safe network, the safe network where you can go and you can exploit, where you can
Mm,
say all of the horrible, socially inappropriate things that would make people go, oh, what a horrible mother, we need to call child protection type things, because we do it with our partners, we do it with friends, we think awful
mm,
things about people all the time, and we're lying if we say we don't. We need a safe place to be able to put that so that we don't give that to our children.
correct. Yes.
So, and it has to be a safe place, because if you've got peers that are going to judge you, you're going to hold back. So you need somewhere where you can just go and, I can't, bloody blah, and off you go.
Friends who can be your swear jar.
Yes, absolutely. You need a swear jar, people. Swear jar.
Yeah.
Um, Brene Brown talks about the marble jar. You need a swear jar, friends, not marble jar friends.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Dopamine. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which I had on my list here, was like self-care is all good and well, and we talk about it all the time. We talk about it in my profession, and I think that's great. But the reality is, going off for a massage one day a month isn't going to help me for the other 3 weeks.
Mm-mm,
Um, and
mm-mm,
I guess I've really come to the point of consistent practice in self-compassion is actually
mm.
self-care.
Yep.
So being able to really talk to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend. So if this was your best friend talking about themselves in relation to their children, what would you say to them? You're not going to turn
Yeah.
around and go, you know what, you're a really crap mum, or you shouldn't do that, shouldn't. Like, whenever you hear yourself say that, that's a challenged word. You go, no, hang on a second,
Mm,
that's a word that's like a red flag. I want to catch that and I want to wonder about why I'm saying should. Where's that coming from?
mm,
What's that about? Why should I? Why shouldn't I? Um, and so self-compassion is really important. And Kristen Neff has got some fantastic materials on self-compassion out there that you can access and look at. But the other thing that's really important is regular doses of dopamine for yourself and reward.
mm,
So, and I think this is
mm,
really important in light of what we were talking about in terms of our second topic, because
mm.
as human beings, we are wired for human connection, and that is where we
Yep.
get our reward through relationships.
Mhm, mhm.
we don't just, yes, we procreate for survival, but
Mm.
we also procreate because it's for the relationships.
Yeah.
And the reality is we get reward from those relationships with our children until we don't,
Mm.
until they can't provide back socially and
Mm.
emotionally in the way that
Mm.
we had maybe dreamt of. Because we all have
Yeah.
our dreamt of children, and then there's the real ones that we get. And so, in the absence of getting consistent, predictable, regular relational reward from our children and we'll get it from others, but we might feel a bigger gap because we're not getting it in that parenting role. But also, the stress of that parenting can impact the relational reward that we have in our relationships from time to time. So we may not get as full a bucket out of our relationship as we would if we
Mm.
didn't have this constant challenge. So I
Mm-hmm.
think thinking about, well, what are the things that I like? So having a social network is really important, but also, like you said, if you've got a playlist, which might be like my 5 minute calm down playlist, so you might get out to the car and rock onto Slayer or, you know, some sort of heavy metal, or it could be that you're sitting there listening to Beethoven and Chopin and, you know, or, like me, you
Crying
could
boys
be,
to men. We won't judge.
yeah, yeah, or like me, you could be out there like rocking it out to Toby Keith and Tim McGraw and Willie Nelson, whatever it is. But, it could be that. It might be ice cream. It could be, I know Richard works out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
could be doom scrolling, whatever it is that will bring you a little bit of reward and dopamine
Yeah.
activation for yourself in those
Yeah.
little moments, but also making sure that you have doses of dopaminergic reactivation in your brains as
Yeah.
parents over the course of a week.
I love that you just gave me permission to eat dark chocolate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
Perfect.
absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important. It is really, really important. Like,
Yeah.
I think, and I'm not saying go and sit and eat a block, but I'm saying, we have to reward ourselves. And I think that's really important in the
Mm.
face of kids who struggle to connect and the
Yep.
meaning that we
Yep.
make about that as parents.
I think that is such a great place to move on to our second topic because
Yeah.
it does slide into it so well. Um, so I want to frame it up, and I'd love you to add to anything after the framing. But
Mhm.
essentially, certain forms of neurodivergence can have complexities in the way that they express themselves in an empathetic and a social way. It's common in autism. It can happen in ADHD, can also happen in giftedness, FASD, trauma. It's across a whole array because when we struggle to understand our own emotions and our connection with others, it's very hard for us to express them to other people. Um, and so, what can happen when you dream, as you were talking about the dream child, and the grief around the dream child is so real. And if anyone says they haven't felt it, they are completely lying to themselves. Please let that go and sit in it because it only breeds resentment.
Mhm.
Um, so, you dream of this child where you'll have things in common. And as they're growing up, they'll come home with their friendship problems. And you might sit and have a board game and laugh about something that happens. And there's these little magic Disney moments that you have created in your imaginary relationship around you and how you're going to grow together with your child. And then your child wants to socially interact in a different way. So they might only be able to talk to you about something that completely interests them and they can't listen to anything from you. Or they might actually not want to share with you at all. At the moment, I've got one who's going through the stage of I am literally there to fulfill his needs when he's hungry, he's thirsty, he needs help with something. Outside of that, he wants nothing to do with me. And if I don't do exactly what he's wanting, I'll get screamed at. Um, so, you can have this breakdown in the perception of the relationship you're going to have. And as you mentioned, those dopamine connections, those love connections, those things that we really need. And whether we understand them scientifically or we just feel them right in our heart, you can feel heartbroken. and you can feel lost, and you can sit around going, how on earth do I connect with my child? So that's what we wanted to talk about. We wanted to
Yeah.
talk about how that feels and what that's like. Um, did you want to add to that at all, Chelle?
No, I don't think so. I'm wondering, Carly, as a parent of three neurodivergent kids, what
Mhm.
is that like? What is it like for you?
Oh my God, I just got tears in my eyes.
Mm.
So I apologize. It is about learning to adjust your expectations and find joy in different things. And
Yeah,
that takes time, and it doesn't always stay that way. You have to do it often.
yeah,
You're frequently reframing. Um, and it can be surreal in a way,
mm,
especially when you're surrounded by family and friends that might have neurotypical children who are celebrating very different things and you see them having very different relationships. Um, it can be very isolating.
yeah,
Um, when you really invest in doing that properly, like you invest in understanding their reality and their goals, you can find the most amazing joy.
mhm,
I think I shared this story and I'm going to share it again in an earlier episode where Mr. Seven hates academia. He's got fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Like learning is hard, theoretical learning is really hard. So anything academic is very tough for him. And he's repeating prep. And the other day, he found my shopping list and he came up to me and he goes, Mum, the tails on your A are too short. I need to show you how to write an A. And he brought me over to the table and he drew me the most beautiful A, an apple with a stem and a leaf. It was perfect. And he was like,
yeah,
Mum, this is how you draw an A. I just wanted to help you. And like understanding his challenges, the things he normally shies away from, and what that meant for
mhm,
him and his state to be proud and to show me that was amazing. It was amazing.
yeah,
And I think my child could have won a gold medal in diving at the Olympics and I would have felt just as ecstatic because for him it was so huge.
yeah.
But you've got,
What?
sorry, I was going to say, just got to really sit and understand that for that to happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, what does it take to be able to do that? Because one of the things I wonder about is if we're busy and we're on the run and we're on the fly and we've got multiple demands, and then we're being corrected for our A, like the risk of quickly over sweeping over that, or just
Mm,
saying thank you, or I haven't got time right now,
mm,
is there's a potential for that. So it's about
mm,
knowing
mm.
this is this is a big thing for him. I need to stop
Yeah.
and I need to honour this and I need to give it the time that it deserves because this is where I connect.
And I look, what I will say to that is I think that in different ways, those moments can happen for neurotypical and neurodivergent children. And
Yeah,
as parents, we want to be able to always catch that moment, no matter what the moment is.
yeah,
And so, I know, how do I explain it? I think sometimes you just need to observe, even when it's flat out. You've
yeah,
just It's even if it's 3 minutes, just observe. Observe what makes them light up.
yeah,
Um, I really relish bedtime with Mr. Seven because he and some nights I'm so tired. I don't want all the talk. I can't say that every night I am thrilled. Please, I am human. But when he gets one on one and he's sleepy and he's feeling vulnerable, but he also knows that he's safe, I get the most amazing gems, like these great stories, confessions, all kinds of things come out. And I just make sure that in those moments I'm actually there. I think a really cool way to talk about that in another way is, there's a lot of conversation around parents and phones and children. And I'm not going to go in and soapbox down that pathway because it's not what we're talking about at the moment. But what they say in a parenting context when it comes to phones and parents and kids, phones are part of our lives. Our work is on them. Our friends do communicate on them. But if your child comes up to you when you're on the phone, or and I'm talking texting or Facebook scrolling or whatever it is, take the time, even if it's to say, I just need to finish this, to actually put the phone down, look them in the eyes. You can need to finish what you need to do. That's fine afterwards, but connect. And so I think if you're using that, just stop, just look them in the eyes, and it doesn't have to be all day. It doesn't have to be hours, but that's when you start to see the things that are really important to them. The other thing is if you're listening to their teachers and what their teachers are telling you and you're picking up the feedback, you will start to understand things that are big for them that aren't normally big for everybody else. But really, it's about finding a way to delight in who they are. And that only comes about by sitting in it with them, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, sorry, you go.
I was just thinking while you were talking, it was just what was resonating for me and what was really coming up was something that I say to parents all the time. You've got 18 years, maybe not even that. They might go earlier. You've got about 18 years. Does it really matter if the lounge room's vacuumed? Does it really matter? And all of my clients would know, I don't bat an eyelid when I come into your home. I hope that it's messy because it tells me you're spending time with your kids. You've got 18 years with them. Celebrate every moment you've got, because one day you turn around and they won't be there anymore. They'll be off living their lives, or they'll be doing whatever it might be, or they might be getting supported services but not with you, or they might be with you, but it's a different journey. And you're right, delight in every moment as it presents itself. And if you're busy vacuuming and there's something that needs to be dealt with, turn it off, put it aside, chuck it back in the cupboard. Who cares? If tea's half an hour later, if bedtime's half an hour later, doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's so it, are they, the end of the day, are they going to remember that you had a clean floor, or are they going to remember that their parents really knew them? But flipping that, I can tell you right now, I don't have, and this is just the space we're in right now, I don't have opportunities to delight in Mr. Nine. It's just not there. And it's funny, there's a difference in relationships at the moment. I think that Richard's getting a few more opportunities than I am, because they do bedtime together, because I can't do 3. And so there can be a bit of rapport at the end of the day. And also the difference in expectation of parents. But I will say that right now, I seriously feel like a cook, a cleaner, and a babysitter. That's what I feel like. And trust me, I am looking for those moments.
Yeah. I'm curious, Carly, when he's, and this, this might sound therapeutic, but I think this is
that's
helpful,
fine.
because the wondering questions that I'm asking Carly listeners are things you can wonder for yourselves.
Yeah.
What does he do who does he go to when he's distressed?
Me.
Yeah. So Richard and he might get those comfort, rapport building, nice moments, and you might feel like chief cook and bottle wash. But it's you that he seeks when he's distressed. He still comes to you. And so it's about reframing those moments of delight. It's a need, but it's about And it's you that he's coming to for food. It's you that he's seeking out for these things. Like, so it's about going, well, I'm still important.
Yes. Yes, I am
Yeah.
still
So
important.
yeah,
I'm very aware I'm still important.
yeah, yeah.
um, it's not always delivered to me in the kindest of ways, but I'm aware that I'm still
No,
important.
no.
Um, but
But are
how
these the times where, sorry to interrupt, but are these
no,
the
no.
times where your need for additional dopamine outside of Mr.
Mm,
Nine are really important, right?
yep,
Because
yep.
he's not giving you the dopamine that you need, but
Mm,
you're certainly giving him the dopamine that he needs right now.
yes, yes.
And that in itself is a delightful experience because he's
Mm,
getting what he needs from you at this
yeah,
developmental juncture.
yep,
So what do you need developmentally, and
yeah,
where do we get that for you?
yep, yep. Um, and there's also an interesting challenge, I suppose, that comes with that too. Is I don't anymore, but I used to try and set up situations that I thought would be, so especially, and I'll say this particularly around how he actually quite likes his own time. Doesn't need the same level of social interactions and relational reciprocity. And I didn't used to understand that. In fact, I used to feel really guilty if he wasn't getting it. And so you try and set those things up and you try and make them available. Um, and it took a very, very long time. And here's the interesting thing. It's taken a very long time for me to accept that he doesn't need that from others. I'm not yet at the point where I've accepted that he doesn't need that. He needs other things from me, but he doesn't need that from me.
Yeah.
And I think there is a whole level of parental grief, and I'm getting this light bulb while we're talking. There is a whole level of new parental grief and processing that comes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other element that I would add into that, so listeners, just before I add this element, I want to say that what just happened then is an example of reflective parenting. And I'm going to talk to Carly about a whole other episode where I can come back for a third time and talk to you about what good therapy should look like, what you should expect and demand from a therapist
Yeah,
in
definitely.
terms of your experience as a parent
Mm,
and for your child. But the other part of that, Carly, that I'd be very interested about, and I don't need you to go into it here because it's your own stuff,
mm.
but what are you bringing from your history in terms of meaning making about him needing you?
Yes, 100%. And I can tell you, without giving everybody my whole private life, I have pondered that too. I
Yeah,
have been pondering that. So I think that there's definitely something there in the need to be needed.
yeah,
Um, and look, I think a lot of people of our generation as well, without going into my history, have been brought up, especially women, to be people pleasers, to feel like we are meant to be creating satisfactory relationships for others, lighting up other people before we light up ourselves.
yeah.
Whether you've had the background I've had or not, I think that that often carries through, and that's a really great point to raise. That you know we're giving our children, our neurodivergent children, the opportunity to be their authentic selves. Um, how does that clash with how we were raised and what our perceptions are? How does that make us feel? And then, how do we sit within that and let that go or realize we're kind of doing it in a different way?
Yeah. And this is why that parent work that I talk about is absolutely essential to wrap around work with that, and in many respects, we could have you just parent the kids and
Mm,
work with you guys, like from an NDIS, as a psychologist, from an NDIS perspective, because all of us bring our history. We all look at a situation and make meaning from it with some of our history's influence, be that
mm,
known or implicit, unknown
mm.
biases that we carry forward. And the work is in making sure that we don't project that on. I was talking
Yeah.
before about, you're actively doing this different style of parenting, you're reflecting on it, and you're combating history.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
I think that
about shifting perspectives,
I think
like when
there's
it
also
comes to our
something
kids.
that is I was just going to say I think it's also really worth recognizing that a lot of the parents we're talking to also give themselves that added layer of compassion and kindness. They are physically present with these challenges because of their children and what their children require a lot more than neurotypical parents. So we don't get the opportunity to send them off to gran and grandpa's as much, or go to a friend's for a sleepover, or do extracurricular sport, or do a school holiday program. You know, these things are happening in our lives in a space where it's a lot harder for us to step away. So my husband and I used to own a business, and I used to always say to my husband, sometimes we have to step back and not be in the business, so we have perspective to work on the business. And it's exactly the same with parenting. And I think we just get less opportunities to step back and work on. Now, I will say that is one of the reasons that having someone to talk to, and, you know, full disclosure, I catch up with Chelle once a month about the what's going on with my children, and it gives me a space to reflect, and it also gives me space to go, hey, was I crazy? Like, I thought that happened. Did that happen? And so whether it's that, or as we we're talking about, you know, whether you've got your swear jar mates, like that time to work on is what gives you the battery to be able to do those moments where you're sitting there going, I don't think my kid gives a shit who I am. And then to place some perspective on that, which we've obviously just done in this conversation. So, yeah, just validate it. Just validate it. Know it. Because you're there all the time for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is going to sound so tokenistic, you know, and I say it to you guys every time when I leave, you know, every time I see you guys are doing an amazing job, you know, and the reality is you are, for these reasons, exactly what you're talking about, Carly, like all of the parents parenting neurodivergent kids, you are doing an exceptional job because you do have less time. You know, and when you are getting respite opportunities, the amount of mental load that goes into preparing the respite carers to be able to care for your kids while you have maybe an hour or two to yourself.
Yeah, and
You
then
know,
dealing with the fallout that might come from after.
correct, right? So that, you know, you might get 10 minutes in that hour or two to yourself where you actually get to relax, because, you know, there's the wind down, the relaxation, and then the wind up in preparation for return. So let's be real, right? You're doing an amazing job. And so that, you know, I've got here like kind of what are some final things I would want to say, and they are self-compassion, which is essentially just being kind to yourself and reminding yourself that you are doing a really good job, even on the days where it feels like you aren't, or you're questioning your parenting capacity, or you feel like you're a failure. You know, we all have that. You know, as even me as a psychologist, you know, I'm useless as a psychologist, and or whatever it might be. But it's about that compassion to say, I'm doing the best I can with what I've got, you know, and I'm showing up for my kids, and I'm in there, and you know, I'm not driving off down the road. I'm regulating myself to show up. You know, and the big thing is, you know, there's no such thing as perfect parent. It is a fallacy. It's a lie. Neighbours, Home and Away, it's all, you know, like those foster families in Home and Away, that's not how they are. The families on TV, Modern Family, that's not how even Modern Family, that's not how they are. You know, your family is your family, and it's perfectly imperfect the way it is, perfectly imperfect. And, you know, we're doing the best we can with what we've got. These are all little catchphrases I use all the time with parents to remind themselves to be compassionate and kind to themselves, because it's in that kindness and compassion that you also get the space to regulate yourself, because a dysregulated adult can never regulate a dysregulated child.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah, I think we often, not that we forget that, but I don't think we let it soak in enough, because I feel with the children that we have and the type of parenting that we need to do and where our society is at right now, we often feel so over observed. we often feel like everybody else thinks they know better than the children that we have and the children that we know. And it can be so hard when we feel like we're constantly being told by somebody else who has no idea. They just need a good smack, or give them better boundaries, or I wouldn't put up with that, or whatever other bit of rubbish that they want to throw your way. And really, what you want to do is you want to turn around and say, I'll give it to you for 48 hours, all right? You have 48 hours of this, and then you tell me what you think I should do. But you also know that you've built up your resilience for that moment, and they wouldn't cope. They'd run screaming from the tree, they'd run screaming from the house. We don't. We don't run screaming from the house. And it doesn't matter what we've dealt with that day. We do go to bed, have whatever quality sleep we can. We wake up the next morning and we do it all again. And we still value our children, and we still love our children, and we still want the best for our children. And we're out there advocating, dealing with gaslighting, every single thing that comes at us for having children that other people don't understand.
Yeah.
And you're amazing. It sounds flippant when I say it, but I cannot tell you how much it comes right from the inner part of my heart that makes my voice want to crack. You are amazing, and you need to sometimes, whether it's with a beautiful shower, whether it's with a glass of champagne or a lovely cup of peppermint tea, you just need to soak in the fact that you are amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Carly. And, I don't want to give you guys as parents have got enough to do with your kids, let alone having to navigate the perceptions and facial expressions of society who don't understand and don't judge. And I don't want to give you any more tasks, but but familiarise yourself with Mel Robbins' let them theory, and let them have their reactions, and you just get on and be the parents you need to be for your kids and show up for your kids. And that's hard, and that might require you to do some of your own work, because we were brought up in generations that we were implicitly and sometimes explicitly told we have to behave and show up in a certain way to look good for the rest of the community. And I say middle finger to that, because your parents, you guys are the experts in them. You know them, you know what they need. And, what's her name in the supermarket giving you the, death stare because she just doesn't agree with how you're letting your child behave? Not your problem. That's her problem. That's not yours.
Yep.
You're doing what your child needs in that moment for your child. You are showing up and being the amazing parent that you are.
So to wrap all of that up, I think in summary, we came here to talk about the moments where you love your child but you don't like them. I think the biggest summation is be kind to yourself. Accept that it's bloody hard, but there is joy, that moments do pass, leaps do happen, and that if you keep doing the incredible job that you're doing, that whether it's now or it's in 2 weeks or 6 months or 12 months' time, the connection and relationship with your children will always continue to evolve and grow. And, just keep being you.
Yep. Yeah. Just be kind to yourself.
Thank you once again, Chelle, for providing so much vital insight. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Carly. And thank you for, kind of almost semi-engaging in some therapy for the listeners to hear.
Thanks so much, everyone. We look forward to talking to you soon. Be sure to check the show notes on our website for any links and references. You can find us at youcangrowyourownway.podbean.com. And if you found this episode helpful, we would love you to help us get the word out. You can share the podcast, tell a friend, and be sure to click the follow or subscribe button so you can access all our new episodes. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, where we would love to connect with you. You Can Grow Your Own Way recognises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of this place, now known as Australia. We're coming to you from Jabberung, Jawajali and Wadawurrung country. the country of our guest speaker, and from wherever you are listening. We respect the elders of the past and present, and we share our friendship and kindness.